Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode number...
I think 23.
You are right.
Boop,
You had to think about it for a second, didn't you?
Ding, ding, ding.
We hope that we have some new listeners on the podcast today. Some of Tammy Hill's fans. We really had a great time recording that podcast with Tammy.
We did. And it introduced a lot of opportunities for us to expand ourselves, which we are always trying to do. But we actually did have some really unique experiences from that.
Yeah, I learned something new about Amy.
Stop. Don't even.
She won't let me tell. Maybe in a more vulnerable episode of the podcast, we'll get to tell what I learned about Amy. But it was not what I thought I was going to learn, but I learned some really good things. And so I suggest if you haven't listened to the episode, you go listen to it right now. And then come back and listen to this one. If you're Tammy Hill fans, we welcome you here on the podcast today.
And if you're any fan, we welcome you.
I'm not just welcoming other fans. They know. They're differentiated.
All right.
All right. Today, we would like to talk about something that actually came up in a conversation this morning we thought was quite interesting. And really, to set the stage, it's when you're going through this transition of learning a new way to engage each other in an intimate fashion, these questions come up all the time. And they still continue to come up from us because we've had these patterns that were with us for 17, 18 years. And what we're doing today is so contrary to those patterns we had in the past that sometimes some of those past thoughts or questions sneak back up into our minds. Mm-hmm. I think we want to set the stage. Let's set the stage again about talking about responsive and spontaneous sexual desires. You want to do that for us, babe?
Sure. Spontaneous desire is where arousing and erotic thoughts, feelings, and ideas come very easily. You don't have to intentionally think about them. They are spontaneously present. You also don't exactly know when they're going to come, but they come very easily. And in most spontaneous desire people, those thoughts, feelings, and ideas lead to arousal very quickly. So you have arousal, you have desire, and then arousal, and it comes very quickly. In responsive desire, that is where someone doesn't have those thoughts, feelings, ideas until after they have been aroused or in a sexual context that they enjoy or have chosen. And so arousal has to come first for a long time, not a long time. Arousal has to come first for a period of time before the sexual desire is present. And so responsive desires often aren't having thoughts, feelings, ideas about sexual desires, sexual passions, sexual fantasies at all throughout the day. Like it just doesn't come up for them. And it doesn't mean that they don't want them. It's just not how they're wired. So you have one person that is more wired to have these thoughts, feelings, fantasies, ideas come very easily and quickly, and another that has to be in a context long enough that they come.
Yeah, and I think we're learning also that we marry the opposite for a reason, right? We're attracted to that person that usually is either the responsive or the spontaneous, the opposite of us, for a reason. And it's the way that it works. I think that if you probably had two spontaneous desire people, it might be a disaster. Waiting to happen. You might not get anything done. You might just be having sex all the time, which sounds great for some people, but life would not go on. Probably get tired of that too. And there's a reason that we do this is it exposes us and helps us grow up, right? Mm-hmm. And so in our previous lives, we didn't deal with this very well.
Nope.
First, I didn't even realize that Amy didn't come turned on like me, that she didn't have this spontaneous desire. I mean, doesn't everyone have spontaneous desire? That's how desire works. And when I first learned that she actually needed to be aroused first before she could actually lean into the desire, it kind of blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? I couldn't figure it out. The other part that just blew my mind, and if you haven't listened to the past episode about this, I suggest you go do it. But it blew my mind too, that not only that, but she could separate the emotional and all the feelings around sex and the physical into two different compartments. Mm-hmm. And actually going through the emotions of making love didn't necessarily bring out all those emotional connections either.
Right.
And then that kind of blew my mind. So there was a lot of differences that we had here that we had to learn. And we spent a lot of time learning these things, and it was a struggle.
Or just getting stuck in
them. Yeah, I mean, for 17 years, we just got stuck in them. We didn't even learn them. And then for 3 years after that, we've battled back and forth, and we spent some time getting better at them, but still really sucked at them. And we're not perfect by any means now, but we can identify a little different now and understand when it happens. We still fall into our old patterns sometimes. But there was an interesting question I asked Amy this morning that I thought would be really great for us to talk about. I still get to this moment, so I couldn't figure out in my head. I said, if it takes you to get aroused first and then desire comes, what happens when you get aroused and you're like, there's no desire? What happens then? And you said?
I said, well, first of all, it's still always a choice. So when we were in our old pattern, our old pattern of, whether you want to call it duty, servicing, pity sex, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like I had to do these things in order to manage, take care of you, or you were going to be pouty, difficult to work with, like kind of grumpy, irritated, all of these types of things, like not easy to be a partner with. And so in the old pattern, first of all, there wasn't a lot of desire happening, and it felt obligatory to give you the experience that you felt you needed. So in the new pattern, let's say sometimes.
Well, let's just even say you didn't know you had desire, or you hadn't figured out there was desire around sexual intimacy. Yeah. Like literally you believed it was something that you did, and you did for me.
Yeah.
And to me.
I have heard many women say this, and I said it too. If I never had sex again, I would be totally fine.
And you'd say that to a spontaneous person that breaks their heart?
Yes. And that's because we're talking about two very different meanings. From the responsive desire saying, I don't desire to be in this frame of servicing you. This sex is not good for me. It's not meaningful for me. I feel taken from. It doesn't contribute to our connection. And for you, as spontaneous, you were really looking to create that connection. And so the meaning of I don't ever want to have sex with you or don't desire sex means that I don't desire you.
Yeah, you never want to connect to me, because we don't disconnect the two, right? It's like, if you don't want to have sex with me or desire sex with me, then obviously you don't desire me. And we can't wrap our minds around that there's a connection, not a connection there, or you can dissociate from
because for spontaneous, it is emotional and physical are the same. And for usually responsive, they're very different.
Right.
So,
and I think let's pause here for just a second, because we're going to go into some things that we talked about what happens now. And I think it's really important for us, and maybe we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this, but I want to set the stage a little bit, that there's a lot of things you have to fix kind of in conjunction. It really is a progression to get there. And if you try to jump off into the thought of thinking of being this desire things we're talking about, and you really haven't learned to have yourself and your own self-worth, and you haven't really able to control what that looks like, then this is going to be a disaster, right?
Yes.
So,
without a sense of self, you can't actually have a sense of true choosing or true desire. I'm not just talking about like a sexual urge. I'm talking about like actually choosing this whole other person. you will be engaging in sexual acts out of something other than choosing.
Right.
Maybe to earn something, maybe to manipulate, maybe to secure some economic stability, maybe to try and keep a sense of structure of a family, but it won't be out of actually choosing this person as they are, because you aren't yet capable of that choice. You don't have a self yet to be able to choose that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just, not to derail us for a little bit, but I want to make sure we set that stage, right? So if you try to skip straight into this conversation with your spouse about this and you haven't gotten firm in what each other's desires are, for me, it was making sure that I understood that I was okay and I didn't need validation. Oh, by the way, here's our grandkitty.
We have a grandkitty that is
sitting this weekend.
This is Sebi.
Sebi's decided
He's
to join
jumping
us.
all over my chair. So if I'm looking down and around, oh no, not on the computer. He's very helpful.
Yes, very helpful. So that's we just had a surprise guest come in. So
yes, if you hear a few
our first live
extra
guest.
meows and things, that's Sebi's contribution.
But if I hadn't learned that I didn't need to be validated and I was okay and that sex wasn't being used to validate me, if I hadn't done that, then I couldn't have this conversation. If Amy hadn't figured out that sex wasn't just a thing that she did and that she actually had her own desires and it was something pleasurable for herself, then she couldn't have got to this question. So I'm just saying that there's work in between that has to be done before you can have a conversation like this.
Right. The framing of sex as duty, of obligation, has to be dealt with first. And also any like pleasing, servicing, entitlement, demanding, those have to be dealt with first.
Yep, absolutely. So once we did this, going back to what the original question was, I said, I still don't get this, Amy, and I can't figure out where this is. And we actually had to wrestle with it a little bit this morning because she's like, well, you're trying to come from this. I'm like, I'm asking that. And you're like, we're asking this. And we went around for a second. But it was really the question I was trying to ask was, well, what does it look like and how does this work if it takes you to get aroused first? So that's a very vulnerable for the spontaneous person because I'm going to go in and help you try to be aroused, right? Whatever that might look like, foreplay or whatever. And knowing that if it gets to a point where that desire doesn't come, what happens? Like, what happens then?
Well, I think the main thing we have to talk about is that I am engaging in this experience, interaction, connective experience out of choice.
But that was the aha that I didn't have. And we talked for a good 45 minutes till we got to that aha, right?
Yes.
Because you're like, oh, we stop, or, I give you a hand job, or we do something quick with it. And I'm, but I mean, still, that doesn't feel right. That makes me feel like we're going back to obligation and duty sex. And that's why oftentimes now I'll just say, no, I'm good no matter what. Right. And I'll go. And that's been the struggle for me because to me, it folds us back in to our old patterns. And we spent a good hour going around and around about this because I'm like, no, that's back to our old patterns.
And I think, again, it comes back to you can be doing the same action from very different intent and motivations. And so it's not about whose hand is where and who's doing what and whose body part is performing in which way. It's about, are you choosing with your heart and mind and soul to commune and be with this person? And sometimes your body comes along and sometimes it doesn't. And so in the face of that, what do you want to choose? And I feel like it's a choice. And that's the difference. The choice is, I want to be with you. I want to experience whatever, collaborate with you. And that's different than I have to do this because you're not going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that was the big part. And it requires trust on both sides, right? Because it looks the same. And why we say we're pretty good at tracking each other, we are, but this is going back. And if you're doing the same pattern that you did for 17, 18 years plus, and it looks exactly the same, there's going to have to be a sense of trust that when Amy says, no, this is a choice I'm making, that it really is coming from choice. And I guess there's trust on the other side, right? That I'm not going to pout or feel like I'm not going to try to suck out the validation from it. And if it doesn't happen, there's not going to be pouting and moping and all the other stuff that came with it too.
I think what we're talking about underneath the actual action is the meanings and choice. What is the meaning of our time together? And when it's not based on an external action, when it's about the meaning of I'm choosing you, I'm choosing to bring myself, my heart, my soul, my body to you. You are choosing to bring yourself, your heart, your soul to me. And in that, we are just following what is.
Yeah. And if I think about it, there definitely was some struggle and progression through this, right? And we talk about differentiation with the two extremes of being entanglement and also toxic independent, right? Mm-hmm. And I think in the beginning, when I realized that this was going on and that no matter what, I didn't want to have duty sex, that was like the thing I wanted to avoid
That was
at all
the
costs.
line you drew in the sand.
Like, never again do I want to see this.
Yeah.
Then I probably took an extreme approach to it by getting a little bit of toxic independence in my life.
That is your go-to.
Yeah, because now it's like, okay, well, that's my life, right? There's no middle ground for me. It's all or nothing. I'm being very exposing here. I'm on or off, all or nothing, right? I'm a flash in the pan. If I start a new project, I'm going to be the best at it for a little bit until it gets monotonous, and then I'll never finish it. Like,
and then that's when I come in and finish.
That's hey, that's kind of how sex happens too. But so yeah, that for me it was I had no way of controlling this. I guess I shouldn't have been trying to control it. That was my bad. But it was so different that I stopped pursuing you a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. And so I stopped asking because I was too vulnerable and I didn't know if it was going to come at a cost of you saying no and me being able to handle it. And then I got to the point where I could hear you say no, but it wasn't still in integrity. It was more of the toxic independence because I was like, I don't give a freak what she cares. Like if she says no, it doesn't matter. So I disconnected in that way. Mm-hmm. Again, it's the same side of the coin.
And that's when I came to you and said, bad. It feels like this is parallel.
Yeah, it's like this. We're living a parallel life. This is when
we were talking. That's when we coached with Jennifer.
Yeah, that's what we talked about when we did Room for Two for Jennifer in our episode there, and she taught us about, hey, you tried but failed.
Well, you changed, but you did the same thing.
But you're doing the same thing
on
on
the opposite side.
Shoot, but I thought I was doing so good. And she's like, eh. And my validation was really struck down at that point. Here it was thinking I was doing so good. But it really took to the point where I was like, okay, shoot. So I can't be toxic independent. I can't pretend like I don't care. So I just really need to care. So I just really need to grow up and be okay with being told no. But I think also something really changed in the way that you said no.
Well, again, because a no from the duty and servicing frame is really very like defensive and protective and like, no.
Yeah, get away. I don't want that.
Like it's defending yourself more than anything. I think it had a lot more maybe intensity behind it. And this, if there was a no now, it was more like, well, this doesn't feel possible for me. So maybe this, or how about here? Like it still had, I care about you and I want to be with you.
Tomorrow morning.
Or how about tomorrow morning? Right now, I'm just so exhausted, but I desire to be with you. So the no was more like still establishing the care and connection, not out of duty and servicing, but out of like, here's where I'm at. I can see you're there. Can we work to find a place between us?
Yeah. And it took a little while for me to see this pattern. Like, okay, well, she's not saying no because she doesn't really not desire me. She's saying no because in this moment she can't find the sexual desire, and that's different. I'm like, holy cow, that's weird, but okay, I'll take it. And so I had to tiptoe into this.
Thanks, babe. You just called me weird.
You are weird.
I'm quite normal. Thank you very much.
Strange stuff. But I really had to tiptoe into this because I was like, this is so different.
Well, it's foreign territory for you because your experience was so different than mine. It was foreign territory for me also to understand that your experience was so different than mine. But when we're not making sexual intimacy about just solving an urge, or fixing you, when we're making it actually about communing. Communing is like, here am I, there are you. We want us to actually be whole, separate people. And then how can we commune? We don't actually want to be the same. That's actually not erotic.
Right.
Eroticism actually comes from our differences.
It's born out of those differences.
Yes, which is why there's usually a high and a low, a pursuer and a pursued, an experienced versus inexperienced. And these are like role play themes. It's because those differences actually create the eroticism, or the way, I love the way Esther Perel talks about it. She talks about separateness, the mystery of the separateness, the mystery that you have a completely different experience than I do actually creates that eroticism.
It can create problems too.
It creates misunderstandings. It creates problems when you think you should be the same.
Yeah, or you don't understand it. I guess that's the same thing.
Right.
You should be thinking the way I think.
You should think the way I think. In order for me to be safe with you, you have to be having the same thoughts, the same feelings. Again, it's like, if we're not the same, then you are a threat. And so if you're not seeing that difference as a threat, but as an opportunity, now you are understanding it completely differently.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. It's understanding that there is differences for a reason, and that shouldn't be something that you worry about. It's something that you should embrace.
I mean, when you start in that honeymoon stage, what is so compelling is that this person is your opposite. They fill in your gaps. They fill in your holes. They see life so differently than you. And
they desire to have sex because they can't have it.
And then you get married and you make those same things a threat, because they actually now expose your weakness or where you want to be dependent upon them. And if you can, again, calm yourself enough to not be dependent on them, then those differences aren't a threat. They're actually what creates this novelty and eroticism.
What changes then? Because when we were engaged, like, they weren't a threat at all. It was just exciting. And then it feels like you get married, you get laid for the first time, and now they're a threat. What changed? Is it really because now we really have to engage in a very more vulnerable, deep way to be connected?
I think when you're
engaged, it was like all new and exciting.
When you're engaged, you still have a sense of your own freedom and your own self.
Which we were engaged for a whole 6 months. I know it was a long time.
And then
we won't tell you how long we were dating before we got engaged.
No, we won't. Then when you get married, there's this sense of responsibility that comes in. And in that responsibility,
the rest of life comes in with you, I guess, too.
Well, I think what you're trying to do is, I think in marriage, we're trying to establish two very different things. You're trying to establish a structured domestic side that is reliable, that is constant, that is certain, right? Like, you want to establish a home, you want to be able to pay your bills, you want to buy groceries. If you decide to have a family, you want to provide this like stable environment for a family. And that makes couples want to be same, right? Like, we have to agree on how to spend our money. We have to agree on how to parent our children. We have to agree. It's this force towards stability. We have to agree, like, on how tidy, how to load the dishwasher, how we fold our towels.
Well, we didn't agree on that. You just came back and redid it after I did it.
That's right.
Overfunctioner.
That's right. I was an overfunctioner. And now he's the overfunctioner in some ways. It's kind of fun.
Hey, I make the bed perfect. And when I let Amy do it, she makes wrinkles all over the bed. And I can't believe it. I walk out and come back and I'm like, how can you make that? How can that be the bed made? Like,
he's like the bed Nazi now.
I don't understand it.
I see a slight wrinkle.
I've showed you so many times how to make this bed this way, and you just cannot. Yeah, I've become an overfunctioner in bed making.
It's pretty fun. And he's learned to do a really good pillow chop, which he had to come around on.
I still think it's ridiculous that you chop your pillows. That was a true sign of love.
That was.
Because I'm like, we are not pillow chopping. That's ridiculous. And then Amy came back the next day, and guess what? The pillow was chopped.
Chop, chop. No, I think the funniest one was the day that your side was unchopped and my side was chopped.
I'm like, okay, there's two pillows. We can do this. For some reason that balance didn't sit well with my mind.
I thought that was hilarious.
But anyway, so
okay,
yeah.
so we are. I think
no, but this is good because you're like, yeah, that's why all this overfunctioning, underfunctioning happens. That's why
we're trying to
this
create
negotiation of stability.
Yeah. And stability is a good thing. The structure is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And we also need to have a part of our relationship that is free, that is expansive, that is erotic, that is passionate, that is flexible. And I think the flexible and free side is more present in the dating before you are crying. The focus is on all the stability and structure.
Well, and this is the problem when you just said that, right? Because one of us leaned towards one and one of us leaned towards the other one.
Again,
so
because it's the perfect erotic
But that's
balance.
what it caused conflict, right? Because now we're thinking, instead of thinking, hey, if someone had come to me and say, hey, you need a partnership to have this stability. If someone had taught me this, maybe I could have grasped it in my mind. But no one had taught me this. And so I'm just thinking, what the hell just happened? Like all of a sudden, my whole life's trying to be structured and I hate it. I want to have freedom. And that's what we rebel against.
Yes. Yes. And I think that conflict that you're referring to right there is why and how marriage grows us up. We have to face the challenge of how can I not only create structure with this person who's different than me, but also create freedom with this person who's different than me.
And it has to be both sides. So both sides have to learn the other and grow up in the other way.
Yes.
Because that's the perfect marriage, is when you're being structured and you have that structure, but you're allowed to go somewhere to have that freedom.
Yes.
I just wanted the freedom all the time. I didn't want any structure.
And you
were
wanted
afraid
the
to death
structure.
of you wanted the structure. You're afraid to death of the freedom.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we were able to grow up in each other's areas and become a little more stable. And I became the bed Nazi of functioning that it would work.
Yeah. So I think it's pulling on really separate parts of our personality, right? Not only do you need to create stability to have a stable friendship, to pay your bills, to have food, to create a stable home life. And you're also trying to create freedom and passion and flexibility and creativity.
What does Esther Perel say?
I love this. Esther Perel says, thriving couples are those who are able to purchase a home and be naughty in it, to be parents and be lovers. And what they're doing is they're balancing the dissonance or the difference between both of those sides.
And it's that distance that actually causes the eroticism.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
You don't make
so much in this podcast.
one more important than the other, right? It's not structure over freedom or freedom over structure. It's both. And can you expand yourself enough on both sides? They're going to ask different things of you. The structure side is going to ask you to expand and grow in different ways than the passion, freedom, desire side is going to ask. They're going to ask you to grow on both sides of yourself.
And also not only that, but if you lean towards one, you're going to learn to be patient, learn to accept the flaws of the other spouse, bring them in. Not that you're superior. I'm not trying to say you're superior in this
It just
area,
maybe comes.
but it also teaches that you want to partner and collaborate with them. And instead of, I spent so many years trying to fix and change you just to say you should be spontaneous,
Spontaneous?
Yeah, that spontaneous like me. And if you had that, everything would be great.
And on the
saying,
structure
how do I
side,
bring you in and help? How do we help you grow in this area?
and if I was spontaneous for something, it was structure.
Yeah.
I could immediately see how we could plan these, how we could organize
this
these.
day at 4:00 we'll have sex every week.
And that was really hard. You were very responsive or rebellious against avoidant.
Free living, the freedom. I enjoy freedom.
And so it asked different things of you. So from the other side, as a responsive desire for structure and organization and bed making, how did you move into being able to choose instead of feeling like it was duty and obligation?
That is a great question, because for a long time I just did it out of duty and obligation.
Yeah. And also to earn, right?
Yeah, if I did the dishes,
You're like, if I do this structure thing, then I'm going to earn this spontaneous thing.
I think it was really understanding that there was this collaboration and that we were a team, right? And that we were different, but that just as in the fact that you had to learn and grow up in the sexual side and others' desires, I had to learn to say, hey, there's a time for all that, but there's also, it's good that the dishes get done. It's good the floor gets swept or mopped. I enjoy that. I don't enjoy it when it's dirty. Before I was like, I don't care. But then I realized I do. And it's good that the bed gets made.
So how did you go from I don't care to I do? I think it's very
Gosh, why are
similar
you
to the
asking a
responsive.
hard question. I think it was just recognizing it and putting it as a priority in me and knowing that it didn't get rid of my spontaneity. It didn't say something bad about me. Maybe getting rid of the validation helped do that too, right? Because I'd always say, well, this is who I am, and I should be able to live the way I live. But it was more of, hey, this is an area that I can grow into and I can appreciate. And it did completely start out like, okay, I'm going to try this and this is going to be hard. And I'm doing the dishes and I'm trying not to feel obligated, but I still feel obligated and I still hate doing them. And it took a long time of doing that over and over and over again to, I think, allow me to get there.
And I think you just described a responsive desire woman or a responsive desire person. It's not always a woman, but it takes that like trusting that. I call it surrender. Like, I am choosing to grow in this way. I'm choosing to lean in. I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes a choice does feel a little bit like
Manufactured.
That's a good word. Because
it's not fault and it's not against you, but you had to actually build it out of nothing.
Right. You had to be more like, okay, I'm going to intentionally lean in this way. You don't like have this intrinsic motivation yet or this intrinsic sexual desire. You're kind of stepping into the dark saying, okay, I'm going to keep trying this and I'm going to hope that the desire comes and that I learn to enjoy this. So there's a surrender, but you're choosing it.
Yeah. It always seems to come back to that. I remember when we were hosting Jennifer, and like every conversation we had really came back to, are you choosing? Are you choosing? Are you doing this out of obligation and manipulation?
Or control.
Yep.
That choice is so powerful. And even if the choice
That's
is
where eroticism grows, is
yes.
what I'm talking about. Like,
and let me say from the structure side of the equation, when I saw you start leaning in and partnering with me, that also helped create.
Sexy as hell, guys.
It is. It's very attractive. It helped create more.
But don't do it trying to be sexy because it won't work.
No, because we can track that. It helped create more trust as I leaned in, right? The more you leaned into where you were uncomfortable, created more trust. The more I leaned into where I was uncomfortable, created more trust for you. And so, but it didn't come from me pressuring you. It did come from me being honest with you. We did have some really honest, hard conversations. So this isn't like you just shut yourself down and like you don't say anything. Like, no, there were some very crucial, difficult conversations. Yeah. And we did have to wrestle through some of these things. And I think in that wrestle, you start to realize what I am thinking and believing and doing is not creating what I really want. And so I'm going to lean into doing this differently, even if I don't have any idea how.
Just scary as hell.
It is.
It is.
That's where you actually grow.
But when you do it and you see like, oh, this actually kind of works. And then like you trust that it's going to work again and you step back into it and do it. I guess that's the definition of growth, right?
Yeah.
And you keep doing it and you grow into it.
I think just repeating, when we were just repeating those old patterns over and over, we just didn't grow. And it feels so painful to be just stuck like that.
Yeah.
And either one of us, like you chose in your own ways to grow, I chose in my own ways. They weren't at the same time. They weren't simultaneous. It was very like back and forth, little by little. And so I think sometimes we think our spouse has to do it first. And I think it can very much be your own choice.
Always an inside job.
Yeah.
Always. 100%, because you can't control the other person.
Never.
You can only control you and grow yourself up. So I should have asked this question a long time ago, probably, because I've been going through this whole thing of like, every time we get to a point and the desire doesn't show up. So you get aroused, and back to the original question, you get aroused and the desire doesn't show up and you go, it's not going to happen. I still probably am stuck in a point of, oh, this is going to go straight to obligation. And so anything offered after that point is, nope, not going to do it. And even when I've said yes, I've been very like, that okay? Like, how are you
hesitant,
feeling? Are
yeah.
you okay?
Which I think is pretty normal, right? Because this old pattern is so ingrained, and it takes some time for our nervous system, our emotions, our mind to trust like what this person is saying is true. And even the person trying something new, it takes some time for their nervous system, for their mind, or their feelings to trust that they're going to be okay actually making this choice, right? Like there's trust on both sides.
And we're going to F up.
Yes.
And I think having that trust of being able to do that and say, that didn't work. And
It's
doesn't
not
mean
about doing it right, though.
No, and that's, I guess what I'm trying to get at right there was in that moment, that used to untangle us and set us back. Any progress that we had made was erased. And I think it was really just coming to the grips of we're going to mess it up, and we just have the tools to make it better.
You're going to mess up. I think you just get faster at pulling out of the mess ups because you don't make it so personal.
Yep.
You make it more about, okay, we're learning. What did we learn this time? And how are we going to use that learning to keep growing?
It was such a shock for a long time. And I've said this a lot of times, and I mean, I might get mad at me finally when I keep saying it, but you know, it was the shock that I don't get the same response that when I was honest about something that she didn't run off and go cry into the closet. Right? I'm not saying she did that every time, but that's the extreme experience I can tell you all about how the response was and how different it was when we had these very difficult conversations that were very honest and raw and true. And they would always end up in that, or me just shutting down and not saying anything.
Or slamming something and storming
very
out.
Very rarely doing that. I think I scared you once when I did that because it was very rare. But the responses were so different. And it was like, oh my gosh.
I think I had to learn to believe that I wasn't so fragile. Again, this is developing that sense of self. I could tolerate more truth. We worked on getting more honest. We worked on those emotional sharings. We worked on learning how to calm ourselves down, regulate ourselves. And so I remember once in one coaching at some point, I'm trying to pinpoint, but someone said something like, I'm not as fragile as I think I am. And like, it just struck me.
And it hits you like, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like, yes, I have sensitive parts. I'm not trying to make this like an unemotional, you know, like you're going to become a stoic, but like, I can walk through the conflict. I can tolerate the discomfort of difficult emotions. Like I'm not as fragile as I think I am. I'm actually stronger than I think I am. And so there was something in that really resonated with me, because I think I withdrew out of believing I was too fragile.
Well, you were also looking for me to fix those problems.
Right. I was dependent upon you. And so when I got just more steady in myself, like, no, I can stay. I can lean in. I can have this hard conversation. I can share. I was also the one that went quiet. And so part of that not being fragile was about me staying and saying the hard things. Here's what your behavior is creating for me. Here's what's happening for me. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I'm believing. Like when I was in that state of mind of believing that I couldn't, all that stayed in.
But again, like we're taught to do that. We're taught to appease each other and not be open and honest because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings and we want to make sure everyone's all right. But again, that's where eroticism is born out of. Not that you have to have conflicts with how to have eroticism, but it's conflict. that ability to stand on your own and be your own person and be different than me that causes that attraction and want you.
Yes.
And we're so confused because we always think that we're the things that we want, our same things are the things that we're attracted to.
Yeah, like the cozy comfort of conformity isn't actually erotic.
Cozy comfort of conformity. Like, what is that, alliteration?
Yeah, that's alliteration.
You go, girl.
Thanks. Sometimes we just want the cozy, and what we need is to tolerate the differences, and that's what creates, because it's erotic to choose someone totally different than yourself. You already have a you. You don't need another you. What's erotic,
you can do with yourself all day. It's not that
is
great.
Communing with what's exactly opposite from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to me, the lesson learned, a few lessons learned, but really the lessons learned was one, we're always learning and growing. we should ask the questions and be curious, right? So I've probably been dealing with this for months, not years now, that the pattern had changed, and I still had gotten to a place when that desire did not show up in Amy, and then we switched to the plan B, and I still was in a very unsolid place. And I don't know, it's been a few hours since we had the conversation, but I truly believe that my behavior will change around this, because that's what I've seen in the past. With that curiosity and that knowledge, behaviors just change.
It's been kind of funny. Speaking of the cat that we had here, this cat is so curious and has investigated every corner of our house and every closet and every cupboard and every part. And I was thinking this morning, we were like curious like this cat, you know.
But doesn't curiosity kill the cat?
It might. Anyways, just seeing real curiosity in action is just that reminder, like, if you aren't believing that you're so fragile, you can be curious enough to wonder about another person.
Yeah. Double down on curiosity. It's never going to be bad.
Double down in believing you're capable of tolerating it.
Yep. That
and
too.
Calming yourself down.
And then no matter what information you get, it's not going to set you off into some place that you cannot process through.
Right. You are going to have emotions. You're going to be disappointed, scared, nervous, shocked, whatever. Yes.
Information you get is going to suck sometimes. Yeah.
And you can move through it, and you can find your calm center. You can regulate again. You can metabolize that. Like, you can do that.
So no matter what point you are on the spectrum, if you're learning, if you're just coming in and starting to learn these new concepts and go, oh my gosh, this is so different than what I'm at. If you've been doing this for a while and now you're at a place where things have changed, still please have these conversations, ask the questions, be curious. Like I said, the information I got this morning, I think is going to be very helpful to me in our relationship. And I was glad I got it. And it almost got confrontational a little bit, because I was like, no, you're going after this and that. But we worked through it, and that's important to be able to do that. And so it's very real.
Yes. And I'm excited. We've got some questions that have come in from y'all. Thank you. Love that. We're going to be talking on those. We're also going to be bringing in a past client so you can kind of understand what's it like to be coached, to be on the other side. We get coached, we coach, and I think as a coach, or if you're being coached, we're always learning. Mm-hmm. And so if you're curious about what that experience is like, tune in here pretty soon. We're going to bring on a pretty amazing couple. Yep.
And for those of you on YouTube, you probably noticed that we're in a very different spot. So we're up in my office. We threw together something because it used to be displaying quite well. In our last home, I had these beautiful bookshelves, they were gorgeous. And I'd be on meetings and people were like, oh my gosh, Greg, those are beautiful. And look at all the books you read. And I'd laugh and I said, those are all Amy's books. So they held Amy's book. But since we moved to the new house, I haven't been able to do it. So I've been having a virtual background. But we're doing our webinar, our workshop right up here in this room. And so all y'all that didn't sign up are missing out. We'll have another one so you don't miss out. But it's going great. And so that's why we've switched spots here for a second.
Now we have our horse Clifford and the painting of actually all of us San Diego, and we're moving to Texas. It has our Coronado Island in the background where we were engaged in San Diego, where we had our first date and were engaged in San Diego. And then a horse for each of us in the family, and then Greggy's horse.
Yeah, we had an amazing lady that came and taught art to our kids, and we commissioned her to paint this painting for us when we left, and it's one of our favorites. It's got horses in, of course it's great.
It's on the beach.
It's on the beach.
So we combined California where we were leaving all of our roots in California with where we were headed. Yeah. And we didn't even know at that time that you were going to fall in love with horses. No. That was like still yet to be discovered.
That was pre-discovered that. So if you're not watching YouTube, just close your eyes and imagine a picture of horses on the beach running. It's great. All right. Thank you so much for being with us. We can't begin to tell you how much we appreciate it. And when we hear the feedback of how much people are listening and enjoying this, it just makes it even more exciting to go do. I think I'm enjoying it so much, I probably would record it if everyone hated it. But it's really been great for me, and I really enjoyed it. So we really appreciate it. So please subscribe and like, because that helps the podcast grow. We've been watching it. It's been doing great. So it's
share with your friends, leave a rating, leave a review. That does help a ton.
Send us questions. We're going to be teeing some of those up here soon, and we really appreciate it.
We do. And we just want to say again, there's nothing extraordinary about us.
Far from.
We believe that anything that we have done, you can do.
Absolutely.
It is completely possible for you. And so that's why we're here. It's to share that belief and to share any part of our journey that might be helpful for you in your marriage, because we really believe having a thriving marriage is the blessing that blesses every other part of your life.
You used to have a piece of paper hanging on your mirror in the bathroom. And what did it say for years and years until I moved to the house? Do you remember? I'll have to cut this out if you can't remember. Something around about to show what's possible, or...
Oh, I was like, which one on my mirror? That's
I guess there was multiple.
There was multiple, so I'm like, which one is he referring to?
Not the one that Greg's hot and sexy, I should get laid. Just kidding, that wasn't the one.
It was believe in what's possible.
Yeah, believe in the possibilities and show those. So it is possible, and we really appreciate it. Until next time.
Keep undressing your intimacy.
Bye-bye.